CIODAY is coming, and so is the new Tech Hero Award. Today I got two of the greatest nominees at this table. Looking forward. Well, good morning, this is CIO TV and this is a special edition. Yes, of course, because what? We're going to talk about the Tech Hero Award. And I got two great nominees at this table. You know there are 3 nominations, but I will explain later on why there are 2 today. But let me first introduce the guests at the table. I've got from clockwise, I got Eric Wesselman from KPMG. I got, of course, Mr. Daniel Gebler, and he is from Picnic. I've got Martijn from 5 Degrees, and I got my distinguished friend Marc Schuuring from BCG, Boston Consulting Group. Welcome, guys. To explain, so you're used to CIODAY and CEO of the Year award, and of course the CEO of the Year award is a personal award for a person. And if you look to today's developments in the economy and society, and especially driven by technology, and you could debate on how serious are we with the digital transformations within our enterprises. And perhaps, if you have notified well in the last 12 years, we have been providing stage for the startups and the scale-ups, mainly from an inspirational point of view. We've seen Picnic, and we've seen Swapfiets, and we've seen Lightyear, and we've seen a lot of them being guests on our stage. But I think there's a turning point today. And the turning point is that these are the type of companies that will be the companies in the end. So that means, as you're in an old enterprise, you better can watch this, right? Because if you don't do what they do, I don't know if you will survive. So that's a little bit well, the provoking one to start with. Before we start, I got Eric Wesselman, and you know him also as the chairman of the CEO Innovation Awards, and of course Marc Schuuring, and he's conducting both within the CEO of the Year Award and also in the Tech Hero Award, the digital maturity assessment. An important piece to understand where are we, right? But before we go here, Daniel and Martijn, let's look to your organization, look to your company. So to start with Daniel in this case, delivering groceries, so to speak, right? But tell me, what is your organization that is doing, and especially in terms of what are your challenges today, Daniel?
Thanks a lot, Rob, for having me and having us as Picnic here. We started indeed with a mission to make grocery shopping simple, fun and affordable. But along this journey, it became very clear that this is not only kind of a grocery, retail and logistical disruption story, but actually much more a tech game. And in the first years, we basically built an MVP that is basically scaling up the grocery proposition. But at this time, at the position where we are now, we're basically building an entire logistical last mile distribution model that is really unique in the world on the one hand, but on the other hand also consists of all kind of components that we can be reassembled and recomposed that is very unique in the tech world.
Right. And if you look to your challenges today, so where are your dilemmas for yourself in this case?
So one of the really interesting challenges that we are tackling these days is that nobody knows exactly how this current economic climate will change kind of business demand, operational models, etc. So therefore, it becomes pretty clear if we cannot forecast how the future looks like, we need on the one hand build agile systems, agile methods, agile tools to really quickly adapt, but even more to build a kind of a toolbox of quickly assembling new technical or new business models based on technical components. And it is a kind of sinking the microservice idea to the next level, where we are no longer just adapting very quickly to a technical challenge, but we are really recomposing an entire business model based on technical capabilities.
Right. Same for you, Martijn. Welcome. 5 Degrees. So what is your business? What is your distinguished features, or let's say
Thanks, Rob, for having us. I'm really proud to be here, first of all. I think it's so cool that if you look at the banking industry, it has been quite, well, not known as the biggest innovators in the world. And I can tell you, 5 Degrees was born, in a way, out of frustration. I came from that world, and I was so frustrated to see how slow banks were able to adapt to new market circumstances, new opportunities that there are, and a lot of pressure also from regulation and compliance. And we strongly felt there was a need for a new wave of modern digital technology. So that's what we embarked on in the last 10 years. But while doing that, there was a whole new trend coming up where basically core banking, like the nucleus of banking, should also be instant and always on. And so we decided a couple of years ago to really use the experience from the first wave and start from scratch all over again to build the ultimate core banking system where we do the product administration of a bank like 30 times faster and better than incumbent systems.
Banking in a box, so to speak, then.
You could say that. You could say that, yeah.
So, and where lies your dilemmas at this stage?
I think what we have seen over the last 5 years is that banks were still reluctant to move over to this new technology. They see the benefits, but they also need to be able to adopt it themselves. And current banking landscapes are typically quite complex, and culture might also play a role.
Right. So if I involve, of course, my dear guests, also Marc and Eric. So Marc, if we look to the bigger trends, right, and not only from a technology point of view, but from a macroeconomic point of view, is this the way we need to look to our companies and enterprises today?
I recognize a couple of things, Rob. So this born out of frustration or born out of friction, I think that's not new. What is new is that there are a couple of macro trends now that expect everything to be right from basically the bottom design up. So we need to have the data, we need to have the privacy, we need to have the sustainability, we need to have the transparency, the know your customer. We always knew that building things, megatrends into something that existing is very hard. And now you see more and more examples. You see it in financial services, you see it in energy, what you've done already a couple of years ago, that in every sector we now see parties that really rethink from the ground up, but also with a data model that is covering the entire value chain, that get funded and that get successful. And I think that's the biggest difference. 5 years ago, the ideas were there, but maybe the funding wasn't there or the drive to complete. And now we see it popping up in every sector.
Right. And Eric, if you look to that, you're having a big number of discussions with your customers, also from your technology advisory point. So if you look to those discussions and you look to let's say it in a simple way, how these guys are really reinventing, right, business models and reinventing organizational models and reinventing the uses of technology within the operating model, business model and organization model. And what do you see in terms of the big trends in the enterprises at this stage?
Well, I think that the enterprises are in general suffering, let's say, from the legacy that they have. And I mean not just technically, but also in the ways of working, etc. So I think that the tech leaders have the benefit that they can start with a clean sheet, basically. No, let's say, cultures that keep them back from making speed and getting things organized. So I think we will see this more and more, and they will challenge the status quo of the current enterprises. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, all right, let's start with a little glimpse first. Picnic. Great sample. Daniel, in this case, what role does technology and data plays, and what do you do differently than others?
Let me start maybe with the first part. So technology itself is on the one hand the enabler of the business model, but even more, it is also the accelerator and the kind of the reinventor of the business model as we work. So while we have, and for the first years, very much focused on the consumer proposition, now the focus is very much on automating the entire supply chain end to end. And the first automated fulfillment center that we launched earlier this year is a starting point of this kind of trend. And what we see is, while it takes easily a year, 2 years to build such an automated fulfillment center, you need to actually, this is only the starting point of reinventing how you do logistics, how you do fulfillment automation. So therefore, what we have built is, instead of have kind of a fastly adapting a software system, we have built basically 25 different capabilities that make fulfillment automation possible. And every automated fulfillment center will compose these kind of business models or this kind of components in a different way. And that allows you to very quickly iterate over the kind of different ways of doing automated fulfillment. And that is basically redefining what means last mile towards customers.
But is it fair to say then that you're perhaps no longer picnic groceries, but perhaps picnic technology? Because is it in any case mattering that it is the end product is grocery, or what could it be?
So we started.
Or is that too much?
It is certainly, so the observation is a fair one. So we started with groceries because it's a very nice market, has low penetration, a big opportunity. But what we are doing is certainly possible for any form of other kind of retail subjects, but also in kind of different directions. So we have already done a return logistics proposition, and there's so much more that we can do with this model.
Right. So Marc, what makes this total setup and the usage of technology and data so unique in your perspective?
If I pick one, because I think there are a couple, but if I pick one, we discussed that many times, it's data first. So what kind of business propositions can you build around data sets that you have that are unique? We call that advantage data sets that have the right quality and the right timeliness. And then how do you build business models that reinforce that data set? And in your case, also the trust of your customers, of course. Again, we're coming out of 30, 40 years of tech for most companies that are not data first, they're solution first. So that it's tremendously hard not to just rebuild those systems, but to install that thinking in a whole 2-3 generations that have never been raised like that.
Right.
An interesting thing, maybe just to build up on this, it's not only using data to design a business proposition or assign a system, but also to make it self-optimizing and self-learning. So every system that we are designing is basically designed conceptually in a way that without any further software development, it will improve by just additional data that we collect during the kind of the operation or the kind of deliveries.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us here. But first, 5 degrees.
They're in control now. That's something that technology has helped us a lot. Mm-hmm. To become in control of your data.
It grows with you, and that's the cool part of what we have built.
Yeah, you can build a lot of great software out there, but as soon as you start having problems in maintaining it, you're dead in the water.
Okay, maintainability.
That's key. It'll bring them resilience. It will bring them less hassle.
It's that part, that nucleus of core banking that others are not delivering. Building a core banking system is like building a rocket. It's huge.
We have over 10 years experience in having a multinational team.
And when it actually works and it pays off, is I think the best thing that happens.
We've got this. We can really make this work.
Any bank that wants a core banking service and they want it now and they want to connect to it, can use it. We really help banks to become the better banks, yeah?
Yeah.
Banking gets liberated.
I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
So of course also for you, Martijn, what role does technology and data play, and what is your key differentiator?
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, data and technology is at the core of what we do, and you could even take it one step further that our purpose is actually related to being not that technology is the enabler, but technology is that we want to be the enabler of banks. So we need to bring it one step further, and the quality and like the need of the banks, but then generalized and make choices in that we have one product that works for all. That is the biggest challenge. And what we typically see is that the choices for technology that are related to security, robustness, reliance, that is extremely important for us. And then data plays a pivotal role in that.
Right. And do the banks grasp the idea? Do they understand it?
I think.
And they embrace it?
Oh yes, they do. But again, we discussed it earlier. I think it's not a matter of where the market is going or if we are going full cloud native with core banking. It's a little bit the how or the when that this will pick up. Today, we're looking at a $300 billion market annually for core banking services. Only a fraction of that, less than 100 million, is cloud native core banking. So we are at the beginning of a big trend and basically unstoppable. But the question is, how fast will it go? Is it 3 years? Is it 5, 10? And that's what we are betting on, that we chose the right momentum to step in this market 3 years ago, to be ready when the market was picking up. And this is why we think that we are best positioned now to take this market.
And how is it financial services developing, Erik, from your perspective?
Well, I'm not the financial services expert. We have other people who know a lot more about it. I actually have more of a question for you, because if you look at the ambition of 5 degrees, if you have a unique core banking platform, then why not step up the plate and do what Picnic does and basically run a bank? But then they run the food bank or a grocery bank, and you run the other bank. So
it's a very interesting discussion that you want to have. But if you look at the full landscape of a bank, that's quite a lot bigger than only doing the core banking, which is already big on itself. So if you look at the multi-layered landscape where you have the front end, you have the engagement layer, we're actually in the system of records. But also that part needs to be redefined and redesigned. And I think the task at hand to build the ultimate bank, to me that sounds a little bit like an utopia, because everything is changing every day. So what we want to do is take one bit out that is extremely important, it's the engine, but then make that perfect and scalable.
So do you see the potential for a white label bank where you basically knit together all the parts that make actually a bank, where other 5 degrees kind of companies provide other elements?
From that same principle that you cannot be best in class on everything. You would be spreading too thin on knowledge and resources. We are strong believers in the financial ecosystems that are popping up at the moment. And we are tapping into that fully. So we are not the best party to do direct debits.
No,
but what I meant, in the market that do that best. So we connect with them.
I understand. But what I meant to say is, so if you take a traditional bank, you look at 5 degrees, you do the core banking. Would you foresee an ecosystem around yourself that provides other elements best in class, let's say, in what they do, which you can provide together as an ecosystem, as a white label kind of a service, to which me as Erik Wesselman can say, I'm going to put my stamp on it and I'm going to say this is Wesselman banking.
I think you could do that, but should we be the ones enforcing the ecosystem to you? Or are we in a more liberal world where we basically bring you a lot of partners that you don't have to take, but you can, and they are probably proven, referenceable, and we have an established relationship with them. I think that's a more attractive proposition to you, because every market, every product market combination is different. So not all ecosystems work best in all different situations. So I think I like the best of breed based on the situation at hand. And that means that we want to enrich our partner landscape and our ecosystem. It's one of our core strategic pillars.
All right.
And of course, then you have the discussion also about the run and the build in this perspective, right? And I see already in your non-verbal communication if you want to respond on this.
Oh, I just loved. I don't know if I want to bank with your bank, but
I wouldn't.
But the fact, I mean, I know you started talking about composable business models. That's basically exactly the question you're asking. So are we going to see more and more companies that specialize in building parts of composable business models? I think absolutely yes.
And the point there is probably if you have this kind of best of breed approach, you can be a breed, basically an element, but then you need to build an ecosystem around you, or you can be basically the best integrated version. And the question is a bit, this is a spectrum, where do you want to be? If you're in the best of breed, then you need to be absolutely in the core and build this ecosystem around you, a bit what you were saying. But you can also certainly play the composition game, where you say you're the best composition or the best integrated solution. Then you're building basically an end-to-end solution that provides all the value that others have to build on top of this kind of best of breed approach.
Yeah. And I fully agree with you. And we have made a clear choice to be one of the best of breed. And in our name, of our nature, of our business, core is already there. So it makes quite sense that we take that position from a new way of distributing technology in a cloud-native core banking system. And that it makes it so makes so much sense actually to then connect to parties that know AI decision making, parties that do direct debits, cards management. We cannot be best in all those, but we can connect them all to our system and therefore create one solution for somebody who wants to compose that.
Now, a very interesting thing, this is just the last remark on this, is that actually this kind of transition has happened in many other industries also. For instance, e-commerce has also started as a pure front office. So nobody did logistics or warehousing. It was always so product. You did only your app and decided a little bit on the catalog, while everybody, including Picnic, is now doing also the last mile logistics. So there is a full integration that provides significant more customer values than only the best of breed of doing just the front office for e-commerce. And the question is here, can a similar transition happen also in banking?
Is therefore the position you choose in the spectrum, is it also depending on the level of what you buy and what you build? Because you're very specialized in builds yourself, right? And run it, and mainly because of that experience, of that understanding of that full circle you want to capture, right?
It started probably very similar to the example of 5 degrees, also a little bit as a necessity, because we couldn't find the right kind of last mile or fulfillment solutions. But what we learn now over time is that you build a significant competitive advantage, and that means more kind of a customer advantage by having the fully integrated solution that I wouldn't go back. I don't want to go back. I really like this kind of end-to-end from before.
What I do understand, but maybe I'm wrong, you are the composer of your landscape. You can build yourself, you might buy components, and you put them all together, and you control that. That makes you unique.
We actually both. We are certainly composing the entire supply chain, but we are certainly building a very large part ourselves.
And for me, composing is also deciding to build components yourself. But in the end, so you control both buying components, building components, and the whole value chain. So and that differs. So if we would be in the same sector, in the same industry, I would love to be a supplier to you. And so that's the way. So there's a kind of a difference that we do not have the ambition to have a composed landscape. So that's interesting.
Interesting discussion. So let me take another dimension to that. If we look to that element of that digital maturity levels, right? What is a key role in how the organizations such as 5 Degrees and Picnics has been growing, developing, and perhaps taking the #1 position in your markets? So enlighten us on that, Marc.
Shall I use some slides for that?
Yeah, that's BCG. That's okay.
Let's go.
Uneven number, all right.
Here we go. We obviously use our model on where are companies with digital. How do they create digital outcomes enabled by people, tech, and by data? And let's start focusing. I'll do a couple of very specific point outs. We measure digital outcomes. How fast do companies get mature on interaction with the customer, internal operations, developing new business models, supported by tech data and AI, and we measure that with a maturity model. And we do that globally with thousands of companies actually filling in this survey every year. Fun fact, we now have 23,000 companies in Singapore doing this real time, feeding the government of Singapore with what do companies need to accelerate their digital maturity. And what you can see, because Singapore is in Asia, and there are a couple more that actually they're more ahead, but they're also growing faster. And typically we see every company or the sector growing 1 to 3 points per year, typically 1 or 2. After COVID, that's interesting. So we've seen, because of COVID, a huge jump in maturity, but also after COVID, so just last year, the consumer sector, where it's always very hard to pinpoint you, Daniel, where you exactly are, but let's say the majority is still within our consumer realm, is actually continuing to grow very fast, +3 points. And that is because they've reached a tipping point. And a lot of the data and enablers are there. I'll get to the financial industry, by the way, where that actually creates an acceleration on the outcomes, because most of the tech and data enablers now allow for what Daniel was describing. Great, I can now combine data, I can make it self-learning, I can adapt or basically attach new business models or parts of an operating model to it and grow that faster. And that speed to value is the game. Now, what you see on this slide is this vicious cycle. So the leaders in every sector, and I mean, you're the tech heroes, you are qualifying for that leader position. They invest, they get more out of revenue, out of their digital services, but they also reinvest back more, up to 25%, I'll show that. And that creates a kind of vicious cycle where they pull away from the laggards that invest less. And that's actually quite interesting. So if you look at the entire sectors, across all sectors, you see a 3% point EBIT difference between leaders and laggards. That's humongous. This is across all sectors. And so we see this now very clearly in our data for the last 3 years. If you extrapolate that for the next 3 years, it becomes only wider and wider and wider. So if you're a laggard these days, you're totally ripe for disruption. There'll be no way you can catch up with this anymore, which is where your companies obviously come in, because a laggard sooner or later will have to revert to doing something radical based on the experience and the capabilities and the knowledge of companies like yourself. Financial institutions, only 4 points in the last 3 years. So where consumer industry did close to 4 points in the last year, the financial sector as a whole did 4 points in 3 years, despite COVID, I would almost say, which is quite dramatic, actually. Now, if we look at that basically, and then I'll stop after these 2 slides, if you look at the future of retail, it's a much more interesting conversation. It's basically what's going to happen. Are we going to have the battle of the ecosystems, the Amazons and the Google? Are they going to be the retailers? And how do the retailers actually going to be forced to actually cater for everyone? Especially now we see the inflation, low coming. Basically, are we going to force them? Consumers expect less products, more solutions, more as a service or as a subscription, or basically understand me and help me with part of my life. It's going to be more and more virtual. Retail consumer is one of the first sectors that will go heavily down whatever the metaverse is going to look like. And we're going to see more and more regulation. It's also one of the industries that's going to be, together with financial, but that's already there, ripe for really data scrutiny, legislation, etc. So you live in a super interesting world, and you're well positioned, where if you look at whereas finance, this is a very boring slide, but this is our data. 55% of the large financial companies are still busy with their IT infra and their tech platform.
Keeping the lights.
44% are still busy with agile at scale. So that shows you a little bit the underlying driver why the consumer sector is basically speeding away so fast, while the financial sector is still working a lot on the enablers. Let me pass it back to you.
Did of course ask for first comments, Martijn. If you see these numbers, but you look to your proposition, you look to your position as 5 degrees.
Yeah.
And if you look to this, you're changing your company, I guess. You're looking to also different propositions in terms of the operating model and your business model, right?
That's totally different. The way we work now with the new proposition and with the existing proposition.
Right.
And I think you pointed it out. This is exactly what is needed. That type of innovation, it's not per se having new functionality. It's about having new ways of distributing that functionality. It's about having higher levels of security, higher levels of controlling and maintaining your data. And what I'm so proud about in our industry is that we see that it's not a price game. Nobody's asking for cheaper services. Actually, they're asking for better services. And that's kind of an inspiring thought. because banks realize that if they want to keep up with the high levels of data management, security, and scaling, their current systems will not support them forever. Yeah? So I think their license to operate is, in a way, at risk at the moment. But there's such a kind of big lake of legacy that needs to be solved. That the growth that we have seen over the past years is not my biggest worry. No. Because it's kind of inevitable that it will come. Right. And I'm actually quite happy with the tradition and the culture that we have in our company, but also that has been derived from banks, of making sure that you are safe, that you know about how to handle regulation, that adapting to regulation is in the core of who we are. And so we have done that now by design, so that we know fast how we can improve our system continuously, adapting to these new levels.
Right. And if you take that from the discussion with Marc, so are you more afraid for Amazon than Albert Heijn?
It's a very
because it's an interesting conversation in the end, right?
Certainly. Yeah. I don't think that, in general, I think there's no reason to be afraid of anything, but I think competition is a very healthy thing to have in any type of market. It is an interesting observation, and we see obviously also that the industry is moving very fast, both from big tech, but also from all kind of more traditional retailers. That we started with a very customer-centric and customer-focused mindset and perspective. So we didn't look so much around us because customers basically loved the picnic proposition and came to us. What we see now is that the proposition itself works still very, very well and is working extremely well. But actually the rest of the industry is doing also pretty well. So that actually is a kind of a very nice impulse to think a bit about how can also we as Picnic develop this proposition further. And that is not a kind of a one-off project, but there's a lot of experiments that we do now at a much more significant scale. Because now we are no longer this kind of small garage-like startup where we can very quickly iterate, but we have now already close to 2 million customers here in Netherlands. So we need to take all of them through the kind of the journey with all the experiments. We recently launched a kind of a meals proposition, and we're experimenting with many things in the app that makes it not only easier for customers to find a product that they like, but also actually tailors it to the service that we want to provide to customers. A bit what Marc was mentioning is that they are looking for solutions to a problem, not only for an actual product that they can buy.
And if you put that then in a perspective of, let's assume that you rapidly deploy to the max data and AI, right? Mm-hmm. So where would be then the next dot on the horizon from a technology or data point of view? Or in a certain way, with the fastness as Picnic goes, is there a Moore's law for you, so to speak?
So this
because your competition is not the traditional one, right? So.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting question, especially because we are operating as a digital business and certainly within a software and a tech mindset, but we have a lot of also physical elements. So the first transition that we do or that we have done is to bring the entire thinking of kind of Moore's law, 10x thinking, etc., into a world where you build physical automated fulfillment. And that was something that we have been very used to it, but actually was pretty challenging for our partners because that was not so common to them. What we see is that with the entire automation that we do on in the fulfillment side, that opens up lots of kind of new business models. So this is basically disruption from below. But you can also think about all kind of automation on the last mile side, all kind of propositions that go beyond our current forward logistics of food, where we are experimenting left and right with small ones, and we will see what basically sticks.
Right. So if I rephrase that question in your perspective from BCG, Marc, so what is still the window of opportunity for Picnic?
Let's go. If you look at data, and AI, we also measure, I don't know if we're going to show these slides, but I'm just looking up the numbers for myself. The maturity of using AI, also in consumer, is still 15 points lower than the digital maturity on the sector level. So what does that mean? Simply, is AI and data already being used in every possible decision, every possible process, every possible point of contact with an employee or a customer? No. So most companies have that vision, but there's still tons of elements to go. And then it becomes even more fun because most of the forward-looking companies use that still to optimize that business flow. And the horizontal use of using the optimizations to start really collaborating together over the entire value chain, we only see that with some 15% of the 25% that are really leading. So there's a whole world there where companies can innovate and grow. And yeah, it's fascinating. So I don't know if you agree or disagree with me that we're only at the start.
We certainly saw this is something what we obviously also see in our daily work. So there is so much more potential what we can do with data and with kind of AI. Also beyond the pure kind of core use cases on the consumer side or supply chain side, which is classical forecasting and many kind of more basic use cases. One thing what we learned is that most of the AI models are actually kind of translating or extrapolating a kind of past behavior. And therefore you're trying to incrementally, let's say, improve your proposition. But the really interesting kind of thought is if you want to make step changes, really disruptive improvements of your service, you cannot make an incremental extrapolation of your past. So you need to actually build an AI model, and that is something what we have done over the last half year, that is also taking this kind of significant step changes or disruption of some of the macroeconomic or external factors into account. And that is a very interesting thought where we can also work on a kind of a longer horizon, so on projects that take a half a year or a year to realize.
So for you, Martijn, where's the next dot in terms of that horizon?
That horizon in terms of how we use data?
Right.
Yeah. Well, banks and data is kind of a very common combination. And what we typically see that banks are to a certain extent reluctant to use AI because they for decision making they also need to know how the decision came together. So it's sometimes quite hard actually to implement algorithms to run financial processes. But we are looking at that, and basically again in the ecosystem world, we think that we should be the ones that make sure that the data is really easy accessible. Right. And that we are not the ones that are jiggling around with it, and that the banks need to do that. So what we do in our ecosystem is we have partners that can work with AI, like credit decision-making processes. We're not the ones that want to have that in our platform. We basically make sure that the data is well structured and available, and that with AI technology you can actually make better decisions based on what you see in the system.
Right. And of course you can bet my question, Marc. Where does the opportunity lies for them?
I was looking at the slide, and we have this slide for many sectors. It's actually, so the slide has a couple of elements. What you see is the more companies are over the threshold of using digital and data, they feed back more and more of their revenue into digital and data, but they also get out of that what they feed back, they go more and more into the real data and algorithm part. Top financial, leading companies, 25% of revenue back into the technology, of which 40% goes into data and AI.
Yeah, but that's the combination of data and AI.
Yes.
And if I talk to banks, 90% of the conversation I have is not about AI, it's about reporting.
Exactly.
And
But
so
yes, yeah.
That's a little bit the feeling that I have is that people talk about it, but well, I'm not sure those levels.
No.
Like
That's what you say.
Everybody talks about it, but nobody does it. That's a little bit.
But is the AI also something you would use in a system of record environment?
Of
or
course.
is that more? Yeah.
Yeah, but people think it's only to the customer to sell them something. But for example, know your customer. Think about the AI usage there that you could do, or basically keeping your data clean. Data has a half-life, etc. I mean, there's no point where you can't use data and AI or basically algorithms to optimize basically your way of working. Last point I would like to make is that what you see in financial is that the top ones get 80% additional revenue from AI, whereas in consumer, that is actually higher. From memory, 23. That's a factor 3 to the lowest one. And you also see that the feedback to data and AI in the consumer sector is 45% out of the 25% that they got. So, and they're less less leaders within finance as well. So there are a number of drivers where you actually see that financial sector compared to the consumer sector is really getting more and more behind.
Well, it doesn't surprise me that the potential of using it is super huge.
Yes.
So if you take decisions on risk, then the margins that you can take out of that are astronomous. So yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Right. Before we continue, because we need to touch that base on leadership, because in the end, there are two great leaders at this table who've made things happen, so to speak. But first, I want to give a little moody on Go Sharing. All right, so at least I've mentioned and introduced you, because there were 3 nominated, but I guess that Go Sharing has a little problem with their route planning, so to speak, or they could not find. And it's just very hard, because this conversation is part of the jury process. So your chances are growth, gentlemen, so to speak. Right, but just kidding. Leadership. It's often let's say, an easy subject to discuss, because we are so familiar saying, yeah, but we do this and they did it. But the question of a lot of people within the audience is often, yeah, but how, right? So great ideas, great mindset, great vision, but then how you get your teams in gear? How do you get it done? Martijn, how do you do that? So what is your leadership style, so to speak? How do you get these 5 degrees guys and girls?
I don't think there's a magic bullet. I think it's about authenticity, that you're close to yourselves. And the team that we saw this trend happening. So the debate internally about whether the traditional incumbent technologies, that they would be kind of being replaced by new cloud-native core banking, that was going on for some time. So I think the whole organization was ready that we want to make that big transformation. And I think the leadership was in the fact that the management team together decided relentlessly that we wanted to go this route, and that we did not go for the easy one, is kind of incrementally renew our current system to be better adapting to what the market was requiring with modern API layers, etc. But we would never create the pure, clean platform that we have now. And I think the fact that we took such a bold and daring decision to start from scratch, basically betting the company, that gave so much inspiration to the teams that basically you didn't have to manage them at all, because they just wanted to go. I think the biggest problem was to define the scope where we want to be, and how to organize that conversation, because that's kind of a conversation that's not only about technology or only about business, to bring that together. And I think we've created some safe place that people felt comfortable in challenging each other without feeling that they were attacking each other. So I think that was the secret that we use most.
Right. There's an interesting element you put on the table, is that they are not scared of attacking each other. So that means that if the scope is too big, or in that perspective?
Well, basically, when you're designing something from scratch, the idea is sometimes simple, but the devil is in the details. So when we started, we didn't know how big the product would be, what type of services the product would do, or that we would use best of breed partners for some services. So defining where we want to play was actually harder than we thought. And it requires kind of a really open dialogue between different disciplines and people, and it had nothing to do with hierarchy. It had to do with people that had a valuable contribution to the dialogue, and to create an atmosphere where people are kind of comfortable in being challenged or challenged. That's a hard thing to do, because it's about passionate beliefs, and people get frustrated about that. And I think we managed to give everybody his voice, and therefore we created a team that was built this what we have now. And by the way, we also did it with clients, very important. So when we were vulnerable enough to ask clients what they felt about our designs and ideas, so we could kind of already iterate quite early in the process without having spent millions and then ask them how it would look like. So it was quite interesting to see how that worked.
Because Martijn, did you make specific choices in your op model, let's say, when you organized? Because you mentioned you were in 4 countries, if I'm correct, right? So did you create centers of excellence around specific areas, or what did you do?
Yeah, we did. But as long as it was clear for everybody what their responsibility was, we used the SAFE methodology. Yeah. So that worked very good for us. It was really clear how the lines would work. We well, except for COVID, we were able to bring over the teams for the 2 weeks planning sessions, and I think all in all, everybody knew where we were going. And I think when people know where we're going and why we're going there, and they are allowed to bring in their own ideas, it kind of marches on its own. I mean, COVID didn't hurt us in a way. It was really funny to see.
Do you have a centralized build team, or do you in one location, or?
Well, we have according to the principles, of course, we have a team that designs and does the product management for the whole program. There are more than 80 people working on this program. Yeah. So it's quite of an organization and planning and allocation. Yeah. But I think on the daily level, people working with each other. So most people from that planning side are based in Amsterdam, but not all of them. Our chief architect is based in Iceland.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
No.
So at your end, in this case, how did you and Joris and Michiel get this flying, that leadership perspective?
So leadership obviously changes quite a bit if you start from the beginning with just a few, let's say, a few people and an idea or a vision, up to the point where we are now in 3 countries and 15,000 people. But the principles that we, on the team level, always applied is we always try to create a kind of an atmosphere of trust that you can feel, because and there's a lot of studies about high-performing teams. But the most important thing, if you want to really have your teams running a lot of experiments and want them really go for bold shots, then they need to be able to fail. So this is probably one of the leadership principles. But if you zoom out a little bit, it was always about putting a red dot on the horizon, building up a vision where we want to go to, helping the teams, and together with the teams breaking it down from a kind of a long-term vision towards a kind of practical plans that we can realize in a week, in a month, in a quarter, in a year. And then also leading by example, just doing the work. I think there's nothing more inspiring, and we are doing regularly also just a ride on the street or in the fulfillment center, and just hearing what everybody struggles with, what's working well, what is not working well, bringing back to the teams and being part of the team and not kind of in a non-touchable leadership team.
Right. And if you looked at Marc, what are the key enablers for in terms of that leadership to bring that beyond a company, to bring that to the highest level of that maturity levels you were looking for? So that outcome base is essential there, right?
Outcome based, but it's in that enabler in the organization. How do you create a totally what we call horizontally scalable organization? Which simply means that if I double the number of teams that actually do business processes, whatever, I don't need to also double the number of support underneath. And by the way, how can I make that still the same size? And that requires a completely modular thinking on how do you organize. And of course, those module boundaries will have to change once you grow a little bit. But the whole idea is basically how can I replicate? And how can I make sure by training, by education, that more and more of the people who do whatever your business is actually can work with data, can work with AI, accept AI, want to pull it in, or want to pull technology solutions into their work in order to improve what they do. Those are 2 things that sound really simple, but actually are really hard to do.
Yeah, where does the dilemmas lie then?
It's almost, we talked about servant leadership. It is really how do you actually put yourself underneath a ever-growing set of people who really do your business, and they do that. You don't. You just enable that. That's 1. 2 is many concepts from the past. So how do you promote somebody that works like that? How do you think about career progression? How do you think about performance management? A lot of those things you need to reinvent from the classical theory if you want to have an organization like that.
Very important things, but maybe one third one to add. And yes, let's say all kind of tech organizations are applying an OKR-like model to organize, let's say, their work. But the really hard part is, how do you actually split up your organization in teams, set all objectives and key results can be achieved by a single team? Because that is exactly what you then, if you achieve that, and that is extremely hard work. Most organizations are not succeeding, but if you do that, then you have actually really this horizontal scalability, where you say twice as many people, twice as many objectives, twice as many key results can be realized. But most organizations are ending up in twice as many people, 20% more output. And that is a kind of a dilemma that we need to overcome in such an organization.
Yes. Right. Nice example. I work with a client that needs 73 teams to achieve one OKR. And it feels good because everybody's involved, but that's exactly the wrong thinking. And I like the way you describe it, Daniel. How can you get maximum dedication from a small group of people to a business objective?
So Eric, if you look then from KPMG's perspective, from technology advisory, and you have this conversation with, let's say, the traditional enterprises, right? You look to the starting point of not only their vision and mission, but especially from the strategy point of view, is the management, is the board connected? Do they understand? Is the leadership there? So what is the discussion you see today?
I see a lot of change happening. So I see that boards are getting more and more, let's say, involved in what's happening on the shop floor, let's say. Yeah? I see change in leadership, where more, let's say, tech-savvy people get on board and understand these new ways of working. You talked about SAFe. This is something that's been going on for a while now, but still many organizations are still adopting it, so not there yet. We talk about leadership, but there's also, of course, the related discussion about talent. So how do you attract the right talent also in leadership positions so they're able to drive these kind of new ways of working and also be attractive to work for as an employee, because you want your North Stars, or how you call them, basically people to look up to. And so I see that many organizations are onboarding, let's say, new leadership that are also attractive employers for their staff to be working with. I think, as you mentioned already, it's the new way of working is to be collectively working. There's not the hierarchy that's slowly removed. I see organizations struggle with that because of they don't have the reputation in the market to attract this new kind of leadership, and as a result, they have an organization that is not as agile as you would hope it to be. And then it's sector specific. You can imagine that some sector is struggling more than the other sector. I think if we look at consumer retail, I think that's fast market. And there you see less challenge than, let's say, maybe in government sectors, where it's harder to get these people in.
Right. So if you look to these two companies and these two great leaders, we need to, of course, drop them the question. So what's their golden bullet or silver bullet, or at least the greatest tips to share? And it's always a part of this CIO TV, because, well, you can better understand what's working rather than to keep inventing yourself and it will not working. So in this case, I will ask Martijn if you will take that camera. And what is the absolute do or don't if you look to the transition you're making, your vision, you try to get that market, well, embrace that, right? So from a CEO perspective here, what would you advise all the girls and boys?
I would say stick to the plan. What we have done in the past is that there were so many new opportunities that we might deviate us from where we wanted to go. And this time we said, if we are a little bit later, if it takes a little bit more money or time to do it, we don't mind, but we are not deviating from the plan. That be relentless to that. So we have built a product, and it is exactly how we wanted it to be. And we have decided to stay to the plan, and we have not deviated from it whatsoever, not a millimeter. And I think that gives everybody a lot of inspiration because they know where we are going. And every step we go forward in a way. and people get totally nervous if you kind of be kind of opportunistic because there's an opportunity in the market, which might sound like fun on the short term, but people get totally disoriented.
Stick to the plan. Daniel, if you take that camera.
Yes. I would advise understand the first principles of your market, of your customers, build up an understanding, a deep understanding of the core capabilities that will form your business model for the next years, and then focus on a process that allows you to, in an agile way, compose those kind of core capabilities to evolving in new kind of business models. If you make this, then you will certainly move faster than anybody else in the industry.
Right. You see, ladies and gentlemen, they got it, right? They understand it, they're playing it, and they're doing it. So, of course, we need to be a little bit twisting the arms a little bit. So, what do you think about Picnic after this hour?
Well, luckily it didn't change my opinion, because I think Picnic has moved the market. And I was talking to Daniel earlier, and I was impressed by the time that these guys had a bold ambition, kind of un-Dutch, how we would like it. So a big Series A with a big ambition. You cannot do it halfway. You cannot say, well, we are a modern grocer and we only do it in one small part of Amsterdam. No, you had big ambitions, big plans, and you executed to the full. And if I listen to you now, I hear that it's not only words, that's actually driven to all the details of the firm, which is quite impressive.
Mm. Great. And of course, Daniel, if you've listened to the last hour to Martijn and also 5 Degrees, what do you think about that?
Actually love what you guys are doing. So I'm very much in the kind of a new modern kind of industries and verticals. So banking is not something that I had so closely on my radar. But what I very much like is that all the kind of parallelities, what we have seen in retail and other industries, maybe already 5, 10, 15 years back, that you go through now, most likely in a little bit more condensed way. But you're certainly pretty much in a leading position to play basically the ecosystem and also to shape the ecosystem. So this is, I think, a very unique position, and wish you a lot of fun with that.
Thanks.
Right. So, of course, Eric, a question for you as a chairman of the CEO Magazine Innovation Award. Are these two not only gentlemen, but their organizations perhaps the best we can see at this stage, as an example too?
At least an example, I would say, definitely. And luckily, one of you have already been part of the process in the past for the Innovation Awards, right? Unfortunately, we haven't met in that arena yet, and I think it will not happen because you're beyond the point. I think, you're very interesting examples for young startups and scale-ups, and wish you a lot of luck.
Thanks a lot.
Right. So to wrap it up, Marc, what did we hear in this hour?
What have we heard in this hour? Basically, how you eat. I'm going to start with the end. Stick with the plan. So manage the scope. We heard that in a number of ways and a number of variants, but also because it guides the teams and it empowers the people to then go off and build the business. I think that's one. 2 is have that plan on how do you expand that, and whenever there's customer friction that you can't find the service for, find a way to actually, in Picnic's case, do it yourself, or find a partner that can do it because they can better do it than you, but it needs to stick to that overall vision that you have, what to achieve. And I think the third one, which I really like, these are companies that are actually living what maturity looks like, but it's one way to get there, and then to maintain that over time while you're growing, while you're building, is, I think, the third thing that perhaps was a little bit implicit in the conversation, but I know is on your mind as well.
Great feedback. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. I wish you all the luck for the jury meeting. That will be relentless, right? And especially I'm looking forward to everybody on CEO Day. And that is the 11th October. And there we will grant 2 awards. And I'm already excited in in expressing what I earlier stated is that these samples are not for inspiration. These samples are, get your story right yourself, right? Because this is what is happening in the global market and in the society. So take that lesson, so to speak. Do I have to say anything else? Yes, stay safe, stay healthy.